All right, page 78. The evidence of this poem is extremely valuable as it shows us conclusively that by this time, at any rate, the lower order of bards had won for themselves the privilege of appearing at a Welsh court and of being allowed to compete with the members of the Closier Corporation. It is exceedingly difficult to make out with certainty the meaning of the poem, but the bard seems to lament the relaxation or abandonment of the ancient custom of the court of the House of Tudor, afterwards the English House of Tudor, where formerly, after a battle, none were without recompense, and where frequently he had himself been presented with gifts. If praise were the pledge of bravery, then his desert should have been to receive liquor rather than to become an ermine. The bard also mentions a certain Bledrew, who would not have given him his due, and seems to imply that this person was guilty of versifying untruth, as well as to apply to him the epithet Tewel-I Gwendid, perverter of poetic practice. The suggestion in this poem, therefore, is that the person referred to was the author of a broken or irregular song. We are further told by Philip that the chair of Maelgwn hire was meant for bards, not for the irregular rhymesters, and that if the chair in his day were deserved, it should be contended for by the consent of saints, in accordance with truth and privilege. A peckered privileged bard could not be made of a man without art. In a second poem, the poet's patron, probably also of the House of Tudor, is asked to pay heed to the contention of the bards and the rhymesters, and the appearance of Elphin in the contentions of Maelgwn is referred to. The bard says that since then, mere chattering had caused long unpleasantness, and the speech of strangers, the vices of women, and many a foolish tale had come to Gwynedd, North Wales, through the songs of false bards whose grammar was bad and who had no honor. Philip solemnly states that it is not for man to destroy the privilege of the gift of God. He laments the fall of the office of the bards and describes his own song as the ancient song of Taliesin, which he says, and this is significant, was itself new for 9 times 7 years. And, he adds finally, though I be placed in a foul grave in the earth before the violent upheaval of judgment, the muse shall not cease from deserving recognition while the sun and moon remain in their circles, and unless untruth shall overcome truth, or the gift of God shall cease in the end, it is they who shall be disgraced in the contention. He will remove from the vulgar bards their vain delight. It will be observed that these poems supply a very interesting account of the points of contention. We see that the Song of Taliesin and the contentions of Maelgwn hire are set up as standards, that those standards were believed to have been regulated in agreement with the will of saints and in accordance with truth and privilege, that the contentions were not open to the lower order of bards, and that a man without art could not become a penker. A penkard. It is alleged that the speech of strangers, the vices of women, and numerous foolish tales had come to Gwynedd, even to Gwynedd, where the contentions of Maelgwn had been held, by means of the songs of false bards whose grammar was faulty. We see that the song of the official or traditional bards is claimed to be the gift of God, that its essence was truth compared with the untruth of the newer song, and that Philip Brided was prepared, as it were, to die in the last ditch, fighting for the privilege of the true gift of poesy. We observe that, in spite of all this, the rhymesters were allowed to tender a song on Christmas Day at the court of Rhys Eunuch. It will have been observed that the first poem of Philip Brided mentions a Bludry who refused to acknowledge him, and whose own song I interpret the extremely compressed syntax of the poem Philip describes as broken and irregular. It is not improbable that we have here a reference to the much-discussed Bledry of Gyrildus Cambrinus, the famous dealer in fables who lived a little before our time. The probability is that in the Bledry we have one of the men who recited Welsh stories in French, and so assisted their passage into other languages. Gaston Paris, so long ago in 1879, identified him with the Briery, to whom Thomas, the author of the French poem of Tristan, acknowledges his debt, describing him as having known les historias et les contes detus les royos et contes quae avante vecu en Bretagne. Philip Brighted is said to have flourished between 1200 and 1250. As Rice eunuch, his patron died about 1220. Probably Philip was born before 1200. Giraldus himself died in 1220. This brings them sufficiently near to allow of the possibility of their both referring to the same bledry. At any rate, this is the only case known to me in Welsh of a contemporary reference to a bledry corresponding to the person mentioned by Giraldus. But I would base no argument upon this possible identity. If the bledry of Philip's poem be another bledry, the fact still remains that he was regarded as being of the lower order of bards, and that Philip, the traditional bard, charged his class at any rate with debasing the poetic diction of the bards and with making untruth the subject of poetry. What then could be the meaning of untruth as the subject of a song, of song? Considering the word in the light of the codes and of the contents of the poems of the court bards themselves, I submit that it simply means tales of imagination. The official bards were prohibited from writing imaginative narrative and material for representation. They were enjoined to celebrate the praise of God and of brave or good men. This they did, as we have seen, in ephetical verse, of which the style is remarkably and intentionally archaic. Philip's complaint that his opponent, Bledry, had no honor means that he did not belong to the privileged class of chimeric freemen from which the court bards were chosen. In the romance of Taliesin, we have the story from the side of the minstrel, but an extraordinarily gifted minstrel who had studied abroad among men of greater learning than were to be found anywhere in Wales, and who insisted that the court bards had forgotten the meaning of the poetry that they practiced. Throughout the poems, the same scornful theme is pressed. Am I not a candidate of fame to be heard in song? Avaunt, you boastful bards! This unprivileged minstrel boasts that the chair is rightly his. He, not any poet of Philip Brighted's merely academic attainment, is the true heir of Taliesin. However, for courtesy's sake, the tale of Gwion and Cerridwen is told in terms of 6th century, not 13th century history. The speeches of strangers, which Philip complains has corrupted Gwynedd, is likely to have been Irish, for Prince Gruffudd ap Kenyon, a gifted and progressive prince educated in Ireland, had introduced Irish bards and minstrels into his principality in the early 12th century. It may have been from this Irish literary colony, not from Ireland itself, that Gwion first derived his superior knowledge. Gruffudd also had Norsemen in his entourage. His careful regulations for the government of bards and musicians were revived at the Carwys Eisteddfod in 1523. Here, finally, is the Hans Taliesin riddle in Lady Charlotte's Guest translation. In it, little Gwion answers King Maelgwyn's questions as to who he was and whence he came. Primary chief bard am I to Elfin, and my original country is the region of the summer stars. Edno and Heinen called me Merdwin. At length every king will call me Taliesin. I was with my lord in the highest sphere, on the fall of Lucifer into the depth of hell. I have borne a banner before Alexander. I know the names of the stars from north to south. I have been on the galaxy at the throne of the distributor. I was in Canaan when Absalom was slain. I conveyed Awen, the divine spirit, to the level of the Vale of Hebron. I was in the court of Don before the birth of Gwydion. I was instructor to Eli and Enoch. I have been winged by the genius of the splendid Crozier. I have been loquacious prior to being gifted with speech. I was at the place of the crucifixion of the merciful Son of God. I have been 3 periods in the prison of Ironhod. I have been the chief director of the work of the Tower of Nimrod. I am a wanderer whose origin is not known. I have been in Asia with Noah in the ark. I have witnessed the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. I have been in India when Rome was built. I am now come here to the remnant of Troia. I have been with my Lord in the manner of the ass. I strengthened Moses through the water of Jordan. I have been in the firmament with Mary Magdalene. I have obtained the muse from the cauldron of Carduin. I have been a bard of the harp to Leon of Lachlan. I have been on the white hill in the court of Sinvalin. For a day and a year in stocks and fetters I have suffered hunger for the Son of the Virgin. I have fostered in the land of the deity. I have been teacher to all intelligences. I am able to instruct the whole universe. I shall be until the day of doom on the face of the earth. And it is not known whether my body is flesh or fish. Then I was for 9 months in the womb of the hag Carduin. I was originally little Guion, and at length I am Taliesin. The deceitful cry of the lapwing. Guion was not so ignorant of sacred history as he pretended. He must have known perfectly well that Moses never crossed the Jordan, that Mary Magdalene was never in the firmament, that Lucifer's fall had been recorded by the prophet Isaiah centuries before the time of Alexander the Great. Refusing to be lured away from the secrets of his apparently nonsensical utterances, I began my unraveling of the puzzle by answering the following questions. Line 11. Who did convey the divine spirit of Hebron? 13. Who did instruct Enoch? 16. Who did attend the crucifixion? 25. Who did pass through Jordan water when Moses was forbidden to do so? I felt confident that I would presently catch a gleam of white through the tangled thicket where the roebuck was harbored. How long have we been going? 12 minutes? Go get a little more. Now, according to the Pentateuch, Moses died on Pisgah, on the other side of the Jordan, and no man knoweth his sepulchre to this day. And of all the children of Israel who had come with him into the wilderness out of the house of bondage, only 2, Caleb and Joshua, crossed into the promised land. As spies, they had already been bold enough to cross and recross the river. It was Caleb who seized Hebron from the Anakim on behalf of the God of Israel and was granted it by Joshua as his inheritance. So I realized the dog had torn the whole poem into shreds with his teeth and that the witty lapwing had mixed them up misleadingly as she did with the torn shreds of the fruit passage in the Gad Gadoo. The original statement was, I conveyed the divine spirit through the water of the Jordan to the level of the vale of Hebron, and the I must be Caleb. If the same trick had been played with every line of the Hans Taliesin, I could advance a little further into the thicket. I could regard the poem as a sort of acrostic composed of 20 or 30 riddles, each of them requiring separate solution. What the combined answers spelt out promised to be a secret worth discovering. But first I had to sort out and reassemble the individual riddles, which we will do next time.